So this is the 19th chapter, and mashallah, it's appropriate for you guys because المعقد التاسع عشر شغف القلب بالعلم وغلبته عليه. Like the shagaf is the a love that has gone to the bottom of the heart, like to the depth of the heart, the deepest of the heart, having the love of knowledge, seeking knowledge, and having this love overtake the love for everything else. So the student of knowledge, true student of knowledge from the adab of ilm, is that he puts the knowledge above everything else. Like he has that love and desire to learn, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that desire and that love take precedence over everything else. So this is the chapter 19. فقصد فصدق الطلب له يوجب محبته وتعلق القلب به ولا ينال العبد درجة العلم حتى تكون لذة الكبرى فيه. He's saying that the truthfulness of your seeking of knowledge has something to do with your heart being attached to it, right? And a servant does not achieve knowledge except that his greatest pleasure is seeking it, right? قال ابن القيم رحمه الله تعالى في مفتاح دار السعادة ومن لم يغلب لذة إدراكه وشهوته على لذة جسمه وشهوة نفسه لم ينل درجة العلم أبدا وإنما تنال لذة العلم بثلاثة أمور. So Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says in the Keys to Happiness, one of his books that he's written, is a beautiful book. If the person's love or desires of other things, like if his first and foremost love is not knowledge, and other loves and desires take precedence over it, for example, like love of sleeping, eating, his shahwat, following his shahwat, anything else, if there's more love than love of knowledge, he won't achieve knowledge. Right? If knowledge is not his main priority in life, and putting every effort and making his love and desire for that knowledge his priority, then he won't achieve knowledge. And he says to achieve knowledge you have three things. بثلاثة أمور ذكرها أبو عبد الله بن قيم رحمه الله في كتاب السارف. He mentioned it in the same book. أحدهم بذل الوسع والجهد. The first step in achieving knowledge is struggling and putting all your effort into it, right? Juhd is struggling, striving. وسع لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, like your utmost capabilities, putting them first and foremost in achieving knowledge. ثانيها صدق الطلب, being truthful in what you're seeking. And thirdly, صحة النية والإخلاص, having good intentions and sincerity. ولا تتم هذه الأمور الثلاثة إلا مع دفع كل ما يشغل على القلب. And these three affairs are not attained except if you remove all those things that preoccupy your heart, right? ومن صبر هذه اللذة في أحوال السابقين من علماء الأمة رأى عجبا في لسان أحدهم. So he said, if you go and look in the past, in the history of our Salaf and the scholars of the old, you will see like wonders in this affair, like how much love they had for knowledge and how much they sacrificed for knowledge. For one of the poets, he said, ما لذتي إلا رواية مسند قد قيدت بفصاحة الألفاظ ومجالس فيها تحل سكينة ومذاكرة معاشر الحفاظ. He's saying that like there's no pleasure, I don't have any pleasure except when I narrate the hadith, musnadan, right? And the sitting with sakina, peacefulness, right? We said before the hadith, when you go on a path to seek knowledge, من سلك طريقا يتسمى فيه به علما سهل الله به طريقا إلى الجنة وغشيتهم الرحمة ونزل عليهم السكينة والرحمة وغشيتهم الملائكة وذكرهم الله في من عنده. So basically, when you go to seek a path of knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sends down upon you sakina, like peacefulness, right? So that's what He's talking about here. That peacefulness, that love, that beauty when you're studying the book of Allah. ما اجتمع قوم في بيت من بيوت الله يتذاكرون يدرسون أو يتذاكرون كتاب الله يدرسون بينهم إلا نزلت عليهم السكينة وغشيتهم الرحمة وحفتهم الملائكة وذاكرهم الله في من عنده. That a person or no people gather together to study the book of Allah except that the sakina comes down upon them, right? And mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the angels cover them with their wings. Some say that the angels cover you, and it goes all the way up into the heavens. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions you by name and those that are around him, right? So this is from the fawaid of talab al-ilm, that blessing, that sakina, that peacefulness, that tranquility. So the scholar here is saying that his greatest pleasure in life is that sakina, narrating the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and having this sakina in the majalis of the ulama. إن لذة العلم فوق لذة السلطان والحكم التي تطلع إليها نفوس كثيرة وتبذل لأجلها أموال وفيرة وتسفك أموال غزيرة. That this pleasure of knowledge is more than the pleasure of being a sultan, like a leader or a ruler over a country, right? It's more dear to the scholars, to the students of knowledge, than having all the pleasures of the world, right? And spending all the money and having all the wealth, right? True knowledge is dearer to them than everything, because that knowledge is something that will save you in the deen, in the dunya and the akhirah, right? Everything else is going to go away. الدنيا ملعونة ما فيها إلا ذكر الله أو عالم أو متعلم. That the dunya and everything in it is cursed except the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a scholar and a student of knowledge, right? That's the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. بات أبو جعفر النسفي مهموما من ضيق البال وسوء الحال وكثر العيال فوقع في خاطره فرع من فروع مذهبه وكان رحمه الله حنفيا فأعجب به فقام يرقص في داره فيقول أين الملوك وأبناء الملوك أين الملوك وأبناء الملوك. So this scholar Abu Ja'far al-Nasafi, he was like once kind of overwhelmed with being upset or depressed and having lots of expenses and lots of family problems, lots of issues and stuff like that. Then he remembered an issue in fiqh that he solved, and he was a Hanafi in his madhab, and he got up like dancing around the house with happiness, saying like, where are the kings and the sons of the kings, the princes and the kings? Meaning that they have nothing upon him. Just for learning that one chapter of fiqh that he understood was greater to him than having the mulk or the kingdom, right? إذا خاض في بحر التفكر خاطري على درة من معدلات المطالب حفرت ملوك الأرض في نيل ما حوى ونلت المنى بالكتب لا بالكتائب. So he's saying basically, like if you gain knowledge, struggling to gain that knowledge, and you achieve it, it's better than having like you're reading a beautiful goal and destination, better than what the kings can achieve with their armies, basically. Learning one ayah, mastering it, is better than the dunya and everything in it. وَلِهَذَا كانت الملوك تتوق إلى لذة العلم وتحسن مقدها فقدها وتطلب تحصيلها. So he's saying that even because of this, the scholars of old, like some of the princes and the kings and the rulers, would go and sit in their majalis, right, and benefit from the knowledge, because the knowledge, is much more important than this dunyawi stuff. قيل لأبي جعفر المنصور الخليفة العباسي المشهور الذي كانت ممالكه تملأ الشرق والغرب هل بقي من لذات الدنيا شيء لم تنله؟ فقال وهو مستو على كرسيه وسرير ملكه بقيت خصلة أن أقعد على مطبة وحولي أصحاب الحديث أي طلاب العلم فيقول المستلم من ذكرت رحمك الله فيقول حدثنا فلان قال حدثنا فلان ويسوق الأحاديث المسندة. So this Khalifa Abi Ja'far al-Mansur, he was one of the great khulafa, and his servants, they said they stretched from the east to the west. His kingdom was huge, right? And he had all the pleasures of the dunya. So one of the servants asked him, do you have any desire that you haven't achieved yet? Or any like greater desire than what you have? And he said, my greatest desire or my greatest pleasure is sitting in like a sitting of knowledge where the students of knowledge are narrating hadith, right? And he's the Khalifa of the whole Muslim empire. He has servants and castles and everything, but the ladha of ilm, sitting and hearing a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, was more dear to him than his whole kingdom. فانظر إلى شدة افتقار هذه الخليفة إلى لذة العلم وطلب تحصيلها وجوعته إليها. So look at, he's saying the Shaykh, look at this Khalifa, the leader of the whole Muslim Ummah, how he desired, his pleasure was seeking knowledge. ومتى عمر القلب بلذة العلم سقطت لذة العادات وذهلت النفس عنها. فانظر فالنظر ابن الشميل يقول لا يجد المرء لذة العلم حتى يجوع وينسى جوعه. So he's saying that the true knowledge is achieved when the heart is solely for the sake of knowledge, right? One of the scholars says that you're not really going to achieve this pleasure of knowledge until you find that this pleasure overcomes even your hunger. So some of the scholars of old, they would be hungry, right, starving from not eating and spending so much time in seeking knowledge, right? But he's saying that sometimes the pleasure of seeking knowledge will make that sheikh or that student forget that he's even hungry, because the pleasure of knowledge even overtakes the pleasure of eating. بل تستحيل الآلام لذة بهذه اللذة. The pleasure of knowledge, seeking knowledge and learning new things and benefiting and growing in knowledge, that pleasure overcomes all the pains of hunger and lack of sleep and lack of dunya, right? That's the true student of knowledge. ولا تعجب فما هذه الأحوال إلا مس عشق العلم. فابن القيم يقول في روضة المحبين وأما عشاق العلم فأعظم شغفا به وعشقا له من كل عاشق بمعشوقه وكثرة منهم لا يشغله عنه أجمل صورة من البشر. He's saying that don't be surprised that these students of knowledge or seekers of knowledge, that their love and their desire and their wanting of knowledge takes precedence over even the most tempting things of the dunya, right? Even the most beautiful woman, for example, or desire, his love of knowledge is more pleasurable to him than looking at that beautiful woman or having that worldly desire. And he's saying فأين هذا الشغف يا طلاب العلم ممن يقدم حظه من عرسه على حظه من درسه. He's saying and where is this love of knowledge, O students of knowledge? Where is it that you would put forth seeking knowledge over marriage, right? ويكون جلوسه إلى السمار ويشيوخ القمراء أحب إليه من جلوسه إلى العلماء. He's talking about now how some people, so they'll put forth worldly desires over their desire of knowledge, right? And they'll sit with people that narrate stories instead of the real ulama, right? He's talking about nowadays, or even at that time of the real seekers of knowledge, they gave up everything to seek true knowledge. But he's saying there's certain people that gave up their real knowledge for worldly desires, right? Like sacrificing, eating, going to walim, weddings and parties and stuff like that, instead of seeking knowledge. And he said some of them would sit with those, they're called shuyukh al-qumara, basically the elders that would tell stories, right? But it's not really knowledge, it's just like movies nowadays, basically. When you go to the movie theater or you watch Netflix or whatever, is these dramas or series and stuff like that. So there would be people back in the time, they didn't have TV obviously, but they'd have narrators of stories. So people would come and sit there and spend hours and hours listening to these stories for entertainment's sake, but it's not real knowledge. So he's saying these students are not being real students of knowledge when you get distracted by worldly pleasures and entertainment as above to real knowledge. And then he says this popular saying is لا ينال العلم براحة الجسم, that true knowledge is not attained by letting your body be at ease, right? If you look at the scholars of old, how much they spent their time and efforts in seeking knowledge. They slept very little, they ate very little, they would sacrifice sometimes most of the time worldly pleasures for the sake of knowledge, because that was their greatest pleasure, right? And it's just something that you can train yourself for. When you want to achieve greatness in anything, you have to sacrifice for it. So the greatest thing that you can achieve in this dunya is the knowledge of the deen. Because that's basically the inheritance of the prophets, alayhim salatu wassalam. There's no greater wealth that you can inherit than knowledge, right? Because that's going to save you in this life and the next life. And the more knowledge you have, the more knowledge you act upon it, the closer you get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So that truly is the best gift of the world that you could ever attain, right? So it requires sacrifice. If you really want to achieve something like that, it requires sacrifice. But the more you sacrifice, the more it becomes sweet to you. You know, when you start something, sometimes it's hard, it's difficult because the shaitan is trying to discourage you, so you don't seek knowledge. Because you know, when a strong scholar is more hard upon the shaitan than thousands of worshippers, right? So he doesn't want you to become a scholar, he doesn't want you to become knowledgeable in your deen. So he makes it difficult at first. But if you persevere and persist, it becomes pleasurable to you. You know, same thing with Qiyam al-Layl. Sometimes when you get up in the night to try to do the night prayer, you're like, oh, I'll just sleep a little bit more, I'll sleep a little more, and then you miss it. You know, the pleasure of sleep overtakes you. But once you force yourself and you start praying, like maybe like 2 rak'ahs sometimes before Fajr, then you start getting used to that and you get to 4 rak'ahs, then you start making it longer, right? And then it gets to the point where it becomes like a ladha, like a sweetness to you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives it as a gift to you, that you look forward to it every night. And when you go to sleep, that you wake up so you can pray Qiyam al-Layl, right? And then fasting, sometimes same thing. It's hard at first, but then it becomes something sweet to you, right? And some of the Sahaba would make statements like that. If it wasn't for Qiyam al-Layl or fasting the days, I wouldn't want to be on the earth, you know. So sometimes when you want to achieve greatness, all the time, if you want to achieve greatness in anything, it takes sacrifice and effort and hard work, right? And whatever you want to do in the deen or the dunya. But the deen, of course, is the most important thing that we can achieve. So it's befitting for us, inshallah, to strive in, you know, try to get that pleasure and halawat al-iman, you know, the sweetness of faith, the sweetness of ilm, and loving it and putting it like dear to our heart and sacrificing for it so we can get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that was chapter 19, and alhamdulillah, we got one more chapter left where we can finish next week, which is about the importance of time and time management. Inshallah, then we'll finish this book, and hopefully in the next couple weeks we'll start a new book. Bi-idhnillah. Jazakumullah khair.
I was asking about the al-shaghaf lil-ilm. You mentioned 3 things to be passionate towards asking for science. So my question is, would you please can you stress again about those three things?
For seeking knowledge, striving, like making the sacrifice and the effort, badal al-wasa' wal-juhd, and then having sidq al-talab, like being true in what you're seeking, right? It's not something that's, like you're saying, I want to seek it, but you don't do anything to seek it. You have to be like sincere and truly in your heart that you're trying to strive to seek this goal. And then the third one is having sincerity of intention for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're doing it for the sake of Allah. So a lot of scholars, they would say that your intention is to lift the ignorance off of yourself so you can worship Allah correctly, right? It's not to gain knowledge so you can argue against people or look down upon people or think, have people call you scholars, something like that. But it's to basically lift the ignorance from yourself so you can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala correctly, right? And then inshallah maybe you can teach others so they can have the same thing, lift the ignorance upon those around you in society so they can worship Allah better, But your first intention is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we should always renew our intention when we're seeking knowledge and when we're calling and giving da'wah. Like, you never want to give da'wah to yourself, you want to give da'wah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like inni قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ. I'm calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ala basira, with ilm, with knowledge. So I'm not calling to myself, I'm not calling to this group or that group, I'm calling to Allah, ala basira, with knowledge. So that should be the main intention.
So the three is parallel?
What is it?
The 3 things are parallel together, like at the same time, you have to make the effort and you have to
Basically they come together, yeah. Because you can't do an action without the proper niyyah. So, having good intention, going in the proper methodology, and spending much effort, basically, to summarize it. You can do it reverse if you want.
I mean, we can do the same thing towards the science of dunya, like the science of, let's say, pharmacy, whatever.
Yeah, you could in any knowledgeable field. Yeah, I mean, make the effort, have the intention, and then being active in your seeking it, But the best knowledge you can achieve obviously is knowledge of the deen. And the basics of the deen that every Muslim should know is fard. You know, like you have to know your basics of iman and aqidah. You have to know the basics of wudu and salat and siyam and hajj, you know, and zakat. Those are the fara'id alayk, you know. So it's not permissible for us to be ignorant of those basics. If you want to go beyond that, that's even better, of course, to become like more knowledgeable and more scholarly so that you can teach others, teach your family, inshallah, teach society. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you are trying to, like, you set your goal, what is your goal in life in general, right? To please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to go to Jannah. How am I going to get to that goal, right? These are the path, this is the way. Am I true in what I really want to achieve? Am I being sincere? Like, is that what I really want? Okay, how do I get there? And this is the way, right? So to learn that way, you know, to be true in what you're saying, you're going to take the proper steps to achieve it. You can't just say, I want to go to Jannah and then not do anything. I want to be a scholar and not study at all. You know, the scholars, they say, إذا تؤتي العلم كلك يعطيك بعض. That if you give everything of yourself to knowledge, it'll give you some of it back. You know, so it's like a whole ocean there, and we're starting in like drops. So you want to keep building and building as much as you can. You know, subhanallah. And it's possible. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for anybody to achieve it, because if you look at the characteristics of the Salaf, many of the great scholars, they were not even Arab. For example, some of them, you know, like Imam Bukhari, who has the greatest book after the Quran, he was Persian originally, you know, from Bukhara. And look at his story, how he became a scholar, you know, how much effort he put into it. You know, it's a beautiful story. Like when he was 3 years old, he became blind. You know, and he was blind, they say, for some years, and his mom made lots of dua for him. And then anyways, he went on and sought knowledge, but you see how much effort he put into seeking knowledge. You know, Imam An-Nawawi, all the scholars, when you look at their history, how much they put a lot of effort into seeking knowledge, and that's why Allah blessed them. You know, yeah, like you can read, like Imam An-Nawawi, for example, he used to not sleep until it overtook him. He would sleep sitting up. Like he would study sometimes 12 classes a day and teach, right, and study for those classes. So it's reported that he would not sleep until sleep overtook him, and he would fall asleep like sitting down, and then he would just wake up and continue studying. You know, and there's other scholars, they went like, they forgot to eat. So they noticed, like, because they were so keen in like traveling and seeking knowledge and writing down the hadith, you know, they would go, like certain scholars they would hear would be in a certain town, so they'd rush to that town and sit there and try to get as much benefit as they can from the scholars, and they'd forget that they haven't eaten. You know, so they'll go and like, sometimes the fastest way they can eat, they'll get old bread, crush it up, mix it with water, and just, you know, drink in the bread and the water together, and go back to the sheikh to keep getting as much benefit as possible. So when you read the story of like how the Salaf sacrificed for knowledge, subhanAllah, I feel like, you know, how ashamed, you know, of how little, you know, because we have so much luxuries and stuff, so it's easy for us to get distracted, and it just takes a lot of effort, you know. But it's possible, alhamdulillah. I've seen, you know, people, companions and teachers, how much they spend studying and you know, doing talab al-ilm. So it's possible, like some, you know, would study maybe like 16, 17 hours a day. I would watch them, you know, mashallah, going from classes to reviewing Quran, you know, and not eating that whole time, basically, you know, until like the end, maybe having a small meal, and then, so it's possible. I mean, you don't have to force yourself not to marry, but it's just basically saying, giving precedence of knowledge to other. The Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, he got married. There are some scholars that didn't marry because of their dedication to knowledge, but it's Sunnah to get married. It's just a balance. Like, are you going to let that preoccupy your time? You know, and some scholars, they waited for some time before they got married so they can have, you know, more time to seek knowledge. And then they were, you know, they thought themselves as basically they've reached a good level, so then they got married after that. So it just depends on the person. Sometimes a marriage can help you seek knowledge better. You know, the wife and the husband might encourage each other to be students of knowledge together. So it depends on the situation, you know. Ya Allah, subhanakallah wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Jazakumullah khair.